Sorry for the couple of minutes delay. Just was a little tighter for, in the office for a second. So, anyways, so this is 2021. Happy New Year to everyone that's watching. Hopefully, you had a good holiday over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And anyways, we're going to get back into it. I'm going to take you through some of the warm-ups or the warm-ups we typically do. Maybe for this year, maybe work on some of the individual postures and the forms you've learned. Try to sort of refine or at least get an understanding of what imagery is, and also maybe the transitions, because learning sequence is just pure memory, and the more you do it, the better you get with it. Memory is one of those things, as if you work with it, you get better with the memory side of it, but that doesn't necessarily improve your understanding. So, with Kung Fu, one of the most important sides of it for many people, not so much for some people that are just purely interested in the sort of the aesthetics, or maybe just the being intrigued with sequential type things. But for people that are interested, it's really functionality. So functionality is something that we should understand more of, and hopefully by understanding what a posture is and what a transition is, that it's really important to be consistent, especially if you're planning to apply these techniques. All right, so let's get started. Feet shoulder width, first exercise. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and stop. Okay, to the side. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and stop. Okay, next, hands up, reach down. 1, 2, 3. To your right, 2, 3. To your left, 2, 3. Center, inhale, exhale. Hands up, reach down. 1, 2, 3. To your right, 2, 3. To your left, 2, 3. Center, inhale, exhale. Okay, hands up again, one more time. Hands up, down. 1, 2, 3. To your right, 2, 3. To your left, 2, 3. Center, inhale, exhale. Hands on your waist, circular movements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Okay, cross, knees, circular movements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, and stop. Okay, hands on your waist. Neck exercise. Turning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Okay. Center. Tilt to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Center. Rotating. 1, 2, 3. Reverse. 1, 2, 3. Okay, center, hands up. Pull in, inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Okay, spread your feet, turn your shoulders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, and stop. Okay? Turning. Stretch it out. Switch. 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 Okay, now we're going to straighten the front leg. Stretch out the back of the hamstring or the back of the leg. Relax. Keep your back as straight as possible. Okay. Actually, stretching is, not only for your kicks, but it actually helps your stances. So you have to have, a more relaxed state in your footwork and legs so that you can get into your stances. And it's not just a physical thing. It's getting into the position and creating a stable base. And you can only get a stable base if you allow your lower extremities, which are your legs, to get into a position that allows you to have some range of motion. And that range of motion helps you get into a position without tension. I mean, there's tension in the legs, but there's tension that actually is conflicting when you go into a stance. So, opening the inner thighs is very important for kicking, but it's also important for your stance work. So it's something that you have to get used to. It is important, I feel, to do this stretching. Otherwise, I wouldn't actually continue to do this as part of my routine. And I think, without this stretching, your body actually will get tighter because it doesn't think it needs to do this. Now, if you want to go into some of the downwards postures, you have to get your legs and your joints open enough to allow for this to happen. There is a relationship in your body that you have to sort of tune into and understand. The relationship and movement is what allows us to become more coordinated, or at least be able to synchronize our body so that the timing that we're looking for is is enhanced, but then allowed to evolve. Because coordination is something that's built, and just to give you sort of a simple example of why everyone looks different is because everyone's muscular tension and ability to move varies. So if we consistently use similar exercises as a group, then we kind of evolve consistently as this group or as a team. So that's actually what's happening. You're learning through a set of exercises that we do, and we do these over and over again. We don't do these over and over again to bore you. We do these over again because this is how we develop, and this is the consistency of our training. So when you go into a stance, the profile is part of the posture. How you get in and out of the posture really depends on what really is the alignment of your skeleton, right? So alignment of your skeleton really allows your body to form these positions based on flexibility and then based on some strength. So strength isn't, the dominant factor. It actually has to be balanced. Okay, here punching. So this is just freeing up emotion. Eyes follow the hands. Switch. Switch. Switch to the side. This is called a sun punch, by the way, and it's the vertical punch. So we have a few variations of punches. This is just one of the formations of the punch. So a sun punch is vertical like this. A flat punch would be this. Okay. Now we're going to bring the hands up. It's a vertical position, and we stroke on the oblique. It's slanting down. If you know that we have a diagonal strike, or I call it the diagonal strike, but it's really a slanting movement. So I'm just doing this fairly slowly so you can capture the position and the timing. They alternate like this. Not alternating would be what? When it's not synchronized, it would be. So where do you turn? When do you, if it's one at a time, how do you synchronize that? You have to pull it up, drop it down, pull it up, drop it down. Then eventually it becomes up and down. So that's how you kind of build your movement. Here's a horizontal position. This is using the edge of your hand. We have this in the fourth form, and actually it's just a direction. Just think of all your movements as a direction. Okay. So a direction is like a vector. It's going in a direction, and where you stop it really is relative to your body, right? So here's directly to the side. If I had two hands going out, it'd be like this, so it's a straight line. But because I'm here, I have to face this way because I'm looking toward the direction I'm striking. Okay, next we have the circular movement, which is a wheel punch. Now, a lot of times, if you look from the side view, the circular punch sometimes is too small. It should be bigger like this. You see that? So you're like, sort of like pedaling a bicycle with your hands. So you're making, because a cycle, it goes like this, right? So your hands are sort of, if you look on the side view, you can see that the hands are kind of synchronized. One up is down, they kind of one up and down, up and down. So the cycling of the movement really is that timing. it would be offset if one hand goes out and the other hand is in the wrong place, and then it just doesn't work. So that cycling is what you're trying to get to happen. It's called a wheel punch, and a wheel, is doing exactly the same. It's just turning in that direction. Cycling it backwards is actually, we don't practice it as in our drills like this, but you do have movements like this. So anyways, that gives you an idea of what we're doing there. Now back fist. So back fist, any form of back fist is using that surface, the back of the hand. And we're striking till it's in line with the body from the side view. So it looks like this. Your focus point is here. The target point is there. Okay. So when you strike, it has to go right. It's shoulder level. So that's where we're practicing. If you go a little bit higher, it goes to the face. If you go a little bit lower, which is really relative to this elbow position, it becomes a low. So you have a low one, a middle one, and a high one. However, we do this as a drill only in the shoulder height level. And center. Okay, deep breathing. The hands go up. Pulls toward the face. Up on your toes and down. Okay, inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Okay, now we're going into a horse stance. Pivot 1, 2, 3 and a half, and we squat down. I think my laces are coming untied. So from here, you're in the horse stance, your hands start here, and we chamber to do the flat punch. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Close. Low block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we cycle through, go do about 10 of them. 1, middle. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1. Okay, so this middle block position, you're not like this. You relax the hand, cup it a little bit so that you have some structure and integrity in the arm. You're not letting it loose and just going to here and not having any focus here. Then we go up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we go through just about 10 of them as a format, so you always kind of fresh in your mind that we're doing those removal. You can do this 20 times, 30 times, 40 times, 50 times on your own, but doing them actually over time, you will get more consistent, and your body starts to recognize, right? So all 3 of them would be like this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. Extend. Low block punch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Extend. Fold. Middle block punch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Close. High block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Close. And then we would push in the bridges. 2, 3. Then we go low. 1, 2, 3, and we'll go high. 1, 2, 3. Then we go shoulder height, shoulder width. 1, 2, 3. Okay, extend. 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, close. Okay, shake it out. So those are basic movements. You have your horse stance, which is the CCMAA. Horse stance is toe in line. So if you see from the side view, you see that the toes are essentially in the same line. In the leaning stance, the toe and the heel line up. That's called the offset horse. So to get into that position, this foot goes back to here, and you turn. Now, when we're doing these blocks, how close is the hand? How extended is the elbow? So I'm going to do this just as positions from the side view. You can see when I'm here. When I punch, it's shoulder level. If I do this block, you notice I'm turning it like this. This hand is on the center line, and this is away from the body. Could be measured about a fist and a thumb's distance, or it's approximately 45 degrees, and it goes like that. Now you do the middle block because your elbow is away from the body. It's not here, and it's not overly extended. So, the position of the elbow gives you a relative to position to this. So that's about nose level, okay? So middle block is here, covers the front of the body, ends up about here. So it's not too close, and it's not too extended. So the reason for that is because if it's too close, you really don't have enough space to be sort of blocking and be practical and safe enough to time the movement because it's too close. If it's too extended, you're using this, but it's kind of flat. So if something came lower, you would actually miss. Okay, so you can see that this is the optimum position because it covers this space. All right, so that's sort of the angle of your movement. If you did a middle block like this and then you turn your hand over, that's actually the dragon claw. So you see how these positions make a difference. Now this is high. It's in front of the forehead. Your wrist is essentially close to center line. And if you look from the side view, it's not here. It's not out there. Okay. It's in between, and it's rounded. Okay. So I talk about geometry, triangles, circles, and squares, right? So these are circles, could be in and could be out like this, right? That's a circle. It's a hoop. So I use the geometry of position to teach so that you can understand the shape of the movement and also the relative position. So relative position means you're using your reference from your own body. Shoulder height, shoulder width, center line. There's so many different references. I don't want to get into every little thing. Then you'd have to try to go down and write it all down, memorize. Just think high, middle, and low. Waist level, shoulder level, forehead level, or eye level. Eyebrow level sometimes used. So that this area is, sort of a, reference point, but within this framework. Okay, now, when you're in the high block position where you have this wrist on the center line, and this circle is really a higher position than the shoulder level one, and in the lower position, it's the lower hoop position. So when you do gung kuen, or you're doing any of the movements that require a double block, that's what that is. When you're in this position, when you do this like you do full hawk, you would be in that position. So what is that? That's muscle memory. It's the shape of your arm. Now, that shape of your arm becomes consistent. That's what we use as whether it's a block or even a strike or whatever it is, we have to follow those guidelines to give us the framework. So what's the framework? Framework is your skeleton. The human is made up of a body made up of bones and tissue. the tissue is I mean, there's lots of different things, but there's muscles and bones. And what controls the bones is your muscles. And what controls your muscles is your mind. So we have to learn to understand how and why we have to learn certain ways and how these principles adapt to, you know, the functionality of these movements. So if you go low, if you go middle, you go high, those are important to understand as a muscle memory and a geometry of position. What you see there in combinations of movements, whether it's circles, squares, or hoops, become part of the postures. So when we start to do the forms or we do the different stances, you'll have always the geometry of position and the body alignment. So there's side positions, there's frontal positions, and then there's also what I call the oblique positions. The body form is really part of the posture. The body form is what it looks like when you go into a specific position, namely a posture. And those postures are what we kind of try to perfect as a position, and those postures are kind of linked together or sequenced together to create the forms. And once we create a sequence of positions, then you have, you know, a makeup of a form or a choreographed sequence. Now, the difference between choreographed sequence by randomly taking a bunch of movements and throwing them together, trying like a dancer would do to choreograph a different set, they can do that, but it doesn't have necessarily a rhyme or reason or an idea of functionality. What we have in forms that have been created by our forefathers as our grandmasters or whoever has developed the form sequence has an idea in mind. So the sequential event and the sequence of the sequencing of those movements actually has a logical approach to what that movement is doing. So it's a scenario or a situation that they thought might be practical in a sense that you're moving from point A to point B. From where? So if you notice, when we do our movements, it's just like low block and punch. We're blocking and we're punching, but then at the same time, what do you do next? Well, if I'm going to go to a low position as a sort of a reflex action or a response, if my hand is here, now it doesn't have to be here, this is training. If my hand is here and I punch and something comes here, I have an option of doing this or doing this. So what you develop from doing these basic drills is a response, right? It teaches you, well, my hand is here, I can go here. Well, why is my hand here at this point? Because we've learned from the different drills that this is a position, and I punch, and I punch. So these are sort of giving you a foundation and a format to know where our arm should be, where our leg should be, and that relationship becomes something that our body becomes intelligent, right? So if I'm here and I go down, I can follow with a punch. So that's kind of like this, right? If my hand is here and I go like this and I block, say I block like this or I block like this, depending on what you're doing, you're capturing here. If something comes here, my hand goes down. That's called sink your elbow. If my hand is here and something comes here, I lift. That's a lifting block to the middle area. If my hand is here and it comes here, I do my rising block or upper hoop. So you've learned these in the drills over the period of time that you've been following, if you've been following, or today you've got some, if it's the first time, you can see the idea behind why we do these different movements. Because how else can you start to recognize what a position is, what's a block, so forth. And the traditional arts have very long forms. They have different purposes. You notice in the Hung Gar forms, we have a lot of openings that are pretty stationary. You don't do a lot of footwork. It's more for conditioning, the position, muscle memory, and learning to use your strength. So learning to use your strength is very important, because if we don't know how to use our strength, then you can't actually react and be efficient or even quick in your movement. So that's what we have to understand as to why we do gung kuen like this, or 5 stands like this, because we practice these movements to have position. So these, we standardly would do 3 movements, but you can do 10, 20, 30 if you're just practicing that movement. So understand that you can practice any of the stuff that we do more than we do it in a class setting, because that's part of, training and developing sort of the weakest part of your movements, or the most uncoordinated part. And that really varies based on your understanding and the depth of the form, or the level that you're at. Okay, so that's what we're actually doing. So that's your high block. When you push out, there's a shoulder width, shoulder level. When we're here and we push out to here, if we open the hand, there's your hu position. So that gives you the idea of consistency. We have to be very consistent for our forms to become embodied. Our body has to know this, otherwise, we just really will not be able to use it effectively. Now, if we go to the triangle position, we're here. Okay, where did the elbow be? A little bit lower. Now it depends, because when you extend the triangle, it goes there, right? You sink the elbow, it goes here. So you can see that that triangle really is center line. On an on-guard position, you don't do this. Not that you can't. This is your center line on guard. This is your side-to-side position. Side-to-side is protecting you here. Center line is here. Okay, both of those work together, interchanging. When you punch to the center line and you switch to the other side, it doesn't happen because it's doing this. It does this because we're turning a little bit in the waist and in the body, because we have to direct the movement toward the center line. So this is a kind of comical to me, but it's actually interesting. I was watching this robotics show, and these competitors were developing robots, and the robots that they punch and they try to compete and knock the other guy out. They do that at some of the elite schools when they have a robotics section. So these guys were developing these robots that would punch, and you try to score and knock your opponent down. So what they found was that when they punched, a lot of times it would just be like this, because that's the most simple action that you can do when you're creating a mechanical movement with a program, or maybe some of these little motors that they use to create the action. So then what they discovered was that they couldn't knock the other person out because they couldn't hit the target. So they were missing one component. And you know what that component is? The motor that drives your torso from right to left. So when they added that synchronized motor, whatever they call those little motors, when you turn, it directs the movement to the center. So that makes it much more direct and efficient as far as targeting, because you're moving. If your robot was this wide, it would be like that. So you actually have to turn toward the center to do that. So as simple as that is, the people that were developing these movements didn't have any martial arts training. So they didn't realize that you turn your body when you punch, and a lot of new people don't realize that. So if you're in a horse stance and you're punching, you're really not punching directly in front of you like this. You're punching to your center. Because if you think about it, if you face your opponent and you're trying to hit your opponent's chest, you have to direct your hand in the direction of that target. So what do you have to do? You have to compensate and adjust your body to reach that target. So that's what, it's as simple as that is. I find it kind of, comical that they couldn't figure that out the first time around. I mean, these guys are pretty smart building these things anyways. But if you don't have any experience and any insight, you may not figure that out right away. But once you figure that out, then you would realize that, that's what you have to do. So the thing is, just throwing that punch and then holding your hands here are two different strategies. So when I'm in my leaning stance, and we do this punch and punch to the kicking exercises, and we're just going to do a few of these. I punch and I punch and I kick. That's my front kick, right? So where's the front kick? It doesn't go over there, it doesn't go over there, it goes right there. It's my center line. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So what I'm doing is 1, 2, kick, 1, 2. So the idea is that we're cycling through. We're building a coordination, a kick, and a back and forth. So you can use this effectively by jabbing. I call it's a jab is this, but it's really our sun punch. So we move forward and move back. Now when you move forward and back, this stays here because your hand is moving in this reciprocating action. And when the hand comes back, you have to realize that backward movement can be defensive. Forward movements generally would be more offensive. But don't leave a movement that's wasted. You can't just drop your hand and punch with this. I drop this hand, do this. You have to control your movement and make it efficient. So when I'm here, I have to time the move. 1, 2. So my foot turns with my hand. My leg is prepared, and I kick. I withdraw, the hand is there, and it's here. So that's what you have to do when you do these drills. I mean, we have that kick, we have the heel kick, we have the center line kick, and we have the round kick, all with the same different hand movements. So if you learn the movement here, you learn the kick, you learn the kick, you learn the front, and you learn the posture, then you can become more coordinated with those movements. So we do these so that you have a basic understanding of synchronization of the body, where the hands and the legs are actually building a coordination. Now, we don't step. We stay in a position for balance and control to go from stance to stance, but there's no reason why you cannot use footwork. Now, that footwork is just like this or sliding step, sliding step. Sliding step footwork is really sort of utilized to bridge the gap. Bridging the gap is moving toward your opponent. The gap is filled and protected by your arms. But you can't get to your target if your arm is not long enough, so it's no good to reach. You have to step. You have to time the movement with the footwork to get to where you have to go. So that's what you learn when you do footwork in stances, footwork in form, footwork in drills. All of this stuff support each other. Okay, so that gives you an idea that when we're here, and we're here, and we're here. Now, you say, well, they don't look anything like we do in Hung Gar. Actually, it's all in Hung Gar. You just don't see it because you're looking at it as this very one view through this sort of a glass, magnifying glass that says, well, that's what the form is. Actually, when we do our drills, they're extracts of pieces in the form, but at the same time, you're building the posture, you're building the timing, and you're building, the different transitions. So, there's a definite, method to the madness, but we do it consistently like this, and we've been doing this for, since 1970, we've been training like this. So we have a lot of students in the past that do these exercises, and if they're still doing it, they're probably still doing these same exercises. Now, don't think these exercises are too simple for you to do because you've been doing this for a little while. We have these exercises done by all levels of students here. And even the teachers here do these exercises. In fact, they lead the exercises. They do them if they're not leading it with the group. So it's something that we do all the time. It's not something we just do because we're doing it on video. We're doing it because this is our format. And at every stage of development, we have a different set of exercises. And the different sets of exercises support the different levels of form. So that's how we do it. And as you know, a lot of people don't realize how our students become so consistent. They become consistent because we're consistent. You can't kind of teach a little of that, a little of that, a little of that whenever you have a class, and then it becomes up. But the information that I'm giving you today supports what you've been doing over the period of time. So kicking, right? You want your knee to go up. In Hung Gar, we don't kick really high. In Northern styles we do. But the fundamental kick has to come up through your center, and you have to bring the knee up, and you have to time the movement. So when the knee gets to here, it goes out. You got the heel kick, it goes there. And you have to develop a little bit of adjustment here for stability. So if your foot's like this or like this, you can't kick. Just realize the anatomical design of your body will not allow you to kick with your foot like this. You have to turn it out. Even in a straight position, it's not as good as when you turn it out slightly because it opens up your hip a little so that you have a cleaner line. And if you step down and you turn out this way, it would be the same. So the pivoting of the feet and all the stuff that you do to get into positions and out of position become sort of a natural response to positioning. That's what we learn when we're here. The turning of the feet allow you to get from one point to another, and it's very controlled. A lot of times with newer students, you rush through the form. You only see the hands, and you're going through the movement, and there's no footwork. If you've learned the form, go back, understand when we open the stance and we twist and step, that footwork is critical, and the body form is critical, because every position makes it work. Without the positioning, you're really relying on a physical strength that's really kind of isolated. So we want to avoid that type of thing. And you know, you may be new at this, you maybe don't have that coordination, but just remember that everything I'm saying here will show up at some point in your learning and at some point in your practice that you begin to understand what I'm talking about. So, you know, information is really important for you to, you know, capture it in your brain, and don't let it go in one ear and out the other because you say that's not something I know. You should just absorb it, at least house it in there. And then when you see the movement, like a chun kyo, when we're here and we open and we find the body positioning, so this is okay here, and then when you turn to this to throw the punch, it becomes transitional. Then you're there. So that's really what your body has to go through, because you go through this position, this position, this position, back to this position. You're maneuvering, I call it the manipulation of your skeletal structure. So you have to go back and forth through your movements, and then your body starts to recognize transitions. But if you go through your forms and you're not really engaging the parts of your body that's involved, how are you going to develop? Here's a sample of someone just kind of going through the motions. How do you get anything out of that? You have to, in the first stage, develop your foundation. And as you advance, you do that with every one of your forms. Once you have it down and you're going through that and you want to rush through your form thinking that speed is really impressive, it gets sloppy. And the other thing is, you don't learn. Your system has a sensory system that starts to define what that action is supposed to be over time. But if you do it and rush through it, what you're doing is confusing yourself. So work with it, slow it down a little bit, get the hand movements, but then try to get the leg movements, try to get the body movement and the torso movement. So you know, these are all under type of understanding that we need to do as we progress through the form. Learning the first form, and then the fourth form, and then in between there's a couple of forms, doesn't mean that when time you get to the fourth form, you're advanced. You've advanced in memory. You advanced somewhat sequentially. But you got to go back to the first form and understand some of what's in there. And there's some foundation things in there. And if you understand it in the first form, it's going to support your fourth form. And then they kind of feed back, and you start to begin to develop a deeper understanding. And when you develop that deeper understanding, then all this stuff starts to make sense. Someone actually in Australia, I think it was Australia, or maybe, I forget where it was yesterday, asked about a horse dance, and that, different styles that person practiced. I think he mentioned Pangai Nun, which is, one of the southern styles, maybe came from southern China. Pangai Nun is actually a system that Wei Chi Ru kind of developed. Pangai Nun is hard and soft. So systems like that, or some of the systems that have a narrower stance, they tuck their hip in and they ask, is this how we should do Hung Gar? Every style has their, theories and principles. Hung Gar has this as an idea, and we tuck here in the iron wire form. But these are positions not necessarily for mobility. You tuck a little during the power point so you have stability, and you have to realize in a narrow stance, if you don't tuck your hip, you're not stable, so you feel like you're rooting. If you do that in a big stance and you tuck your hip, you're actually not in a good position. So in Hung Gar, we don't tuck the hip. You don't even tuck the hip when you're in a cat stance. If you do this, you're actually creating stiffness. You can't even get out of your stance. So important to remember is that when you open your stance and you're in a vertical position, the tailbone should be vertical, and you just balance between the release and the hip. When you turn into a stance, you relax and you settle. You don't tuck. If you tuck, you created tension. Tension's going to be a conflict. In fact, when I tell people to learn the movement, relax. Let go of the tension, and then create the movement and learn and build the sequential coordination to develop the movement, and then build strength and power after that. But don't do it so that it's completely relaxed. You have to have something there, but build with sort of strength and flexibility, and then your movements will be better. Now, when we're here in horse stance and we turn, we have this as a movement. This is a lift. That's that high block. This is a strike. But doesn't mean that your hand can't change to another position once we're here. We do change. We go to this position, and we go to this position. That's in the second form. In the first form, we do this. But then we remove, so the form says, do this. So what are you building there? You're building this relationship of the hand that's here. This is defensive, this is offensive. When the hand is here, you want to move. Someone grabs, you slide down. So it's not this part that's important. It's this part that's important, where both hands are working together. It's not just this part that's important. You have to sit back and sync. So if you look from a side view, the energy comes from the drop. The stability of the stance comes from letting go. So if you do this and you do this, you cannot sync because your hip is tucked. So tucking of your hip will take away from that syncing ability in your stance. So during transition, you cannot have your hip tucked. During finalization, in some styles, you would tuck the hip or stabilize, the lower part and the upper body, and that's the purpose of that. But during transition, you can't stay tucked all the time. How are you going to move? Nothing will move. Your upper body and lower body become independent and isolated. Body body integration is where power comes from. So keep that in mind. And, if you were the person that asked that question, that's my answer to that. And if you don't feel that that's correct, that's fine. It's because you may have to find another source to explain it in another way. But in Tai Chi and Kung Fu, that traditional arts, there is sometimes a little bit of tucking, but very seldom. You have to let your body become one. Anyways, now what I was saying is cross hand positions is a setup. So you go to drunken fists or you go to the backside. So cross hand position is a setup for your center line. But very seldom do you really block like this. Because if you block like this, you're also exposed here. If you block like this, you're exposed here. So you usually generally would use one hand at a time. And they alternate. You notice in a diagonal strike, one hand goes up, one hand goes down. Reason for that is because when they crisscross, it allows you to have a transition that covers the upper part and the lower part, and it doesn't allow you to be overly exposed. Because remember, every time you punch, you're exposed. Because why? You're committed here, leaves you exposed here and exposed here. So to cover this, we try to do this. To watch here, you would sort of react this way. So while you're punching, you can turn to this. So this is what you see in diagonal strike. But I didn't go into diagonal strike position to the Song Gong Xiu. This is the double bow position from here. I went from here. That becomes transitional. So transitional becomes a reflex action, whereas in form, you're formulating your body to recognize that. But in application, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't always have to necessarily go through the scenario and the form. That's where a lot of people have misinterpreted form. They say, well, no one really fights like that. Of course, no one fights like that because the events don't happen like that. So the reason for that is because people that don't do the traditional forms long enough don't realize that we're not doing that, simply because that's what we think our opponent's going to do it in the long run. They might you're creating a reflex action from an action, and that actually becomes part of the training. So, with that said, it's, and I could spend, a whole hour just talking about that, but the thing is, I want you to understand that when you do your forms, say in the second form, and you come to here, and you scoop up, and you come to here, there's a timing that allows you to set up and then transition into the next position. That's the phases of your development. You learn the form after we do the two punches to here, and you cross the hand. You can actually make the first hand, the step, the cat stance, and the punch, and I didn't incorporate any of the body form. If you do this, and you scoop, that becomes synchronization of the upper body. You see the position, and you see the position. So chest is over there, hand is over here, stance is over here, hand is here, hand is here. So there's a beginning to every posture and an end to every posture, and then the transition between will vary based on your level of understanding. So that's what we're doing in 5 stances. In 5 stances, we do it like this. Right? It's the same circle. It's the same circle. Similar to a dragon claw as a motion, but not really called dragon claw in that as a posture. So that's chun keo, circular movement, right? Now, the claw position, you don't want any time to do a block and it's just open like this. You have to create this paw position, whether you want to call it a tiger, a dragon, a leopard, whatever it is. your hand has to have some strength in the hand in order for you to capture as a structure in the forearm, because when you let go of the hand, this really becomes somewhat flaccid or no structure. You can't actually use it as a block. When the circular movement intercepts, it's really using your forearm. It has to be tied to the legs, and it has to be. So that's just one posture in the form, right? If we take that movement on the right side that goes to the front leg, and we're in a high-low position, and we cross, and then I come into it like this, I'm synchronizing my legs with my hand and my shoulders with this to create the alignment of this in front of the nose, centerline position. The knee is bent. In fact, this knee should be over the tip of this toe. If you see the position, you notice that my knee is in line with the tip of my shoe. And my hips are square and my body is square. So that's the square position. The slanted position is the one that we did with this or this. That's a slanted position, like in the salute. So that's what we call body form transition. Final position is the posture, which is an image. So, in the next stage of your development, maybe in 2021, learn a little bit more about postures. Learn a little bit more about what that looks like, and try to capture the alignment of the body. Because if you don't understand that, then you're just running through the movements. So if you just run through the movements, where is the posture? Nothing is actually working. It's not working because the joints in the body hasn't been developed. You haven't recognized the positions that the elbows and knees and so forth have to work as a unit. The angle, the position, a salute, 1, 2, 3. Okay? You see the position, there's your shoulder hoop. You open the hand, there's your pod position. Here, there's your center, there's your triangle. So the transition from here to here happens in the lower back. The transition from here to here happens in the legs. So those things are part of your training to understand that the musculature in your body has to adapt to create strength within the posture for strength and not weakness, and stability and strength, because that strength should be natural. Okay, on that note, that's it for today. I didn't go through much sequence. You have a lot of that archived already, but going through it and running through it isn't really advancing. You can go through it and you have it memorized. Now you have to kind of go back and pick this stuff up and then kind of go through your form and kind of pick through it to kind of improve everything and anything inside the form that's misunderstood or